Turning 40 brings about serious changes in a person's character. I noticed that in my parents. It was as if they lost interest in life and did everything by inertia. Mom and Dad stopped being interested in how I was doing at school, although my progress at school used to be very important to my dad. He liked to say, "Vicky, education is the foundation on which you will build your whole life. And if it's fragile, life will fall apart quickly." But his own belief didn't help my father, and now his own life was falling apart. Hi, my name is Vicky, and my parents changed when they turned 40. At first, I thought my mom and dad didn't love each other anymore, and I was very worried that they might get a divorce. Then I would only see them on the weekends. But my suspicions were wrong. Something else was bothering them. But I had a hard time figuring out what it was. One day I came home from school. I heard my mother's voice. "Is that you, Vicky?" "Yes, Mom." "Honey, come into the living room. We need to talk." My stomach turned, like I had a handful of nails in it. But we didn't talk about the divorce. "Honey," Dad said, "Mom and I have decided to sell the house, buy a trailer, and go on a trip." I didn't know what he was talking about at first. What does that have to do with me? "You're coming with us." "What about school?" "You'll study on your own. We'll help you." I still didn't understand. "What about friends?" "You'll be in touch." Finally, I began to understand. This is crazy. Why would you sell the house? It's so uncomfortable living in a trailer.
"There's room for everyone."
"What about our stuff?" "We'll sell everything we don't need." "I don't want to. Can I stay here and keep an eye on things?"
"I don't think so. We don't own the house anymore."
I wanted to scream out of helplessness. Then I thought it would be better if they divorced. At least I'd be living in the house. Watching my mother give away my things was hard. "Vicky, this won't fit in the trailer. Leave it. I'll give it to the neighbors." "But those are my best dresses," I protested, but to no avail. And so we left the house and drove God knows where in the trailer. I was very angry at my parents for depriving me of a normal life. "Now we're some kind of hippies," I told them. Daddy turned to me.
"Baby, don't pout. You'll see, you'll like it. We can go anywhere we want. Where would you like to go?"
"Home," I muttered, and put my headphones in my ears. My only connection to my past life was my phone. I texted Karen constantly, asking her how it was going. It was still bearable at first. We stopped and camped by the ocean. There were juniper groves nearby and a sandy shore beneath our feet. I spent all day lying on the sand and sunbathing, sending Karen pictures. My friend would say, "You don't know how lucky you are, lying on the beach while we solve boring problems, and it's been raining here for a week." I was even beginning to enjoy this crazy trip. But my serene days came to an end. My parents remembered that I had to study, so they took over teaching duties. Dad was an engineer, so he taught me exact sciences. And my mother was a lawyer. She was responsible for law, economics, and languages. My father was a lousy teacher. He'd yell at me for even the tiniest mistake in my calculations and constantly reminded me the importance of all this.
"This takes an incredible amount of diligence and meticulousness. One mistake and you're under the rubble."
Mom was no better. In fact, it was like a game of good cop, bad cop. With Dad yelling at me, Mom, on the contrary, spoke to me affectionately, like a little child. However, she had the same problem. After 10 minutes, she would start talking about her job. Mom talked about the most interesting cases, like how she sued the company for $1 million for accidentally injuring someone with their products. And then she went off to wander wistfully along the beach. Meanwhile, I was texting with Karen. But even the beautiful beach and the amount of free time were starting to get tiresome. And especially the sound of the ocean, which I never got used to. And those mosquitoes that could eat you alive in an hour. My parents also quickly got bored with it all, so we finally left. Our next stop was the Salt Desert, the largest in the world. There was a small campsite set up for camping, where strange people like my dad and mom would gather. I looked at them and I couldn't understand why they all couldn't sit still. Well, what fun is it to drive around in this piece of junk forever and bathing in the open air? But I was glad just to be surrounded by people. A few more weeks alone with my parents would have driven me crazy. It was also where I met the most handsome guy in the world. Oh, God, when I first saw him, my jaw almost dropped like in cartoons. But still, I quickly realized that it is rude to stare so blatantly and walked over to get to introduce myself to him. "Hi, I'm Vicky."
"Hi, I'm Daniel."
I didn't know what to ask him. So many things were running through my head. But then he broke the awkward silence himself. Daniel made a suggestion.
"Do you want to go lizard fishing?"
"Okay," I said, even though I wasn't a big fan of cold-blooded things. But for Daniel, I was willing to do anything. All the more reason to get away from my parents for a while. The heat in the desert was unbearable, and the sight of Daniel took my breath away even more. "Come on," he said, and he held out his hand to me as we climbed the small sandhill. I took his hand and everything inside began to tremble. Daniel showed me where the lizards were hiding. "They're so fast," I said as we watched them run across the salt crust.
"So fast that they can even run through water."
Daniel caught one of the lizards and said he would name it Vicky, and then he let it go. I was head over heels in love. So we played around every day, catching lizards, then we'd bring them back to camp and race them. Some people made bets, and we even made a little money. It was just for fun, though. There were a lot of funny characters in the camp, like the retired general, who would tell a new obscene joke about the military every time, or a former acrobat who could bend in half like a sandwich. I loved it at camp. I learned a lot of interesting stories there. But just as we settled in, my parents decided to leave. I begged them to stay at least another week. Why such a rush?
"It's because of that guy,"
my father concluded. "No, it isn't," I resented him, even though I knew he was right. It was impossible to change my parents' minds. Daniel gave me a handmade bracelet with a Coca-Cola lid on it as a parting gift. I cried and ran to the trailer. At that moment, I was terribly mad at my parents, and I was starting to get homesick again. It was unbearable. Every time I met someone, got to know them, it was time to leave. Parting with people sucks. Karen wrote that soccer season is in full swing right now, and the whole school is going crazy. I even missed going to school. Well, now we were heading north. My parents really wanted to hike in the woods. We camped far away from civilization. There was nothing around but trees and roads, where only once every few hours another car came across. "Jack," Mom said to Dad, "I think we're out of food." "How?" I cried out. "Are we going to starve now?"
"No one's going to starve, not on my watch."
Dad pulled out a hunting rifle from the trailer.
"I'll get the food myself."
"Dad, you've never been hunting," I reminded him.
"Yeah, but I don't think it's hard. You aim and shoot."
I still thought it was harder than he was describing, but Dad went hunting anyway. Meanwhile, Mom was doing the dishes. I had nothing to do but read my chemistry textbook. Sitting and reading about covalent bonding amid the giant pine trees was even more boring than listening to the teacher's monotonous talk. My father was gone for more than 3 hours. An emptiness the size of the universe formed in my stomach. I was terribly hungry. If Dad came back with nothing, we were dead. "Don't be so dramatic," Mom said, though I could tell she was worried too. And why didn't they listen to me when I said we should stay in the camp, where there were other people and food? Instead, we are now hungry, without food, God knows where. How I wished Daniel was with us. He would have figured something out for sure. Finally, my father returned. It was obvious from a distance that he didn't catch anything, but as he got closer, we saw that Dad was carrying something. It was berries wrapped in a t-shirt. Our hunter silently put them on the table and said,
"It could have been worse. And that's enough for a day, till we get to the nearest diner."
"Are they really safe to eat?" I asked, fearing that my father wasn't very good at this sort of thing.
"Yes, of course,"
he said and swallowed one of the berries. My stomach was churning for food, but I didn't touch the berries. I don't know, maybe I was afraid, or maybe I just wanted a big steak. "You don't want any?" my mom asked me, surprised. "No," I answered. "I'll wait until I can have a hamburger." My parents quickly ate all the berries, and then something strange started to happen. My father asked me,
"Vicky, where are your eyes?"
"What?" I didn't know what he meant.
"You don't have eyes. Where are your eyes?"
"Mom, what's going on?" I turned to my mother and cried out in horror. Her eyes were completely blank. "Baby, don't you want to fly on clouds?" Then they started crawling on all fours on the ground, just like babies. I got really scared. I had no idea what to do. There was no communication, no one to call for help either. My parents were acting strange. I was afraid something would happen to them, or that they wouldn't come to their senses and would stay this way, crawling on the wet ground with crazy smiles. They started grabbing dirt and smearing it all over their faces. "Stop it!" I yelled, but my parents couldn't hear. I looked again at the phone screen. No signal. The only thing to do was to climb a tree and try to call from there. So I did, even though the trees were very tall. Fortunately, I could get a signal and called 911. An hour later, a helicopter came for us, and they evacuated us out of the woods. My parents got their stomachs pumped, and the next day they were fine. What happened made them come to their senses. We went back to our hometown after all. It's a good thing my father didn't burn or throw away the money from the sale of the house, but buried it in the woods. So we bought a new house, which I was happy about. I went back to school, and of course, failed my exams, but later I retook them and got into college. My parents didn't take crazy trips anymore. What would you do if your parents gave up everything and went on such a trip with you? Write your answers in the comments, like the video, and share it with your friends.